had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.
This is the year of like travel books, man.
McMurtry, huh?
This is the year of
The American Walk Book.
I don't know
major
why I
historic
came
and
upon
natural
these.
walking trails from New England to the Pacific Coast. That's cool.
Found that one at Jackson Street last weekend. Yeah.
What did you say right before that? I don't know what.
This is like the year of travel books.
And you said, I don't know.
I don't know what has caused this.
Yeah. I was watching something.
Because I've just kind of stumbled upon Rings of Saturn.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, roads. I'm reading something right now that I'm just about finished with, Invisible Cities. Just a lot of books about places and
Yeah.
movement.
You said something, and it was like, I forget how you said it, but it made me think of this YouTube video I was watching. This guy was going through his jazz records, and he pulled out a record and told a little story about it, which was, you know, this guy has a huge collection. He's like, I've had this record for like 43 years, and I just listened to it for the first time recently. And he said something to the effect of like, you know, music finds you when you need it, you know,
Yeah.
like these things find you versus,
Oh, yeah.
you know, like it was like for the 43 years you had this record sitting on a shelf, not 1 minute up until when you first chose to listen to it was the right time to listen to it.
Yeah.
It happened when it needed to
Oh,
happen.
I'm a firm believer in that.
I love that stuff.
No, I absolutely agree. I think, yeah, things just kind of find you at the right time, and especially I feel that way with books and usually film too. I think
Movies, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you kind of you're always paving the road for what's gonna come. I don't know, it's just road metaphor.
Roads.
Die.
Watching Ewan McGregor.
You're always kind of, yeah, you're setting the foundation for what's going to come at some point. You know, it'll find you at the right time. You might seem like you're doing something aimless for months and months and months, and maybe this is just the human tendency to build a narrative around,
Yeah,
you know, what has happened in order to kind of better understand it. But I think, yeah, you're kind of always planting the seeds for the future. But yeah,
agreed.
it's interesting.
Have you read Lonesome Dove?
Book. I haven't read it. I've watched. It's one of my favorite.
Classic.
And then he also did. I mean, he's done Comanche Moon and
Right.
I mean, he has a lot of probably well-known
Yeah. Did he
works,
do
but he also did Last Picture Show.
Last Picture Show? I was just going to
which
say that.
Great, yeah, fantastic
Yeah.
movie. Peter Bogdanovich.
Yep. Jeff
Yeah,
Bridges.
and so this is interesting. It's very literary. I'm about halfway through it. I just got the physical copy because I was halfway through it on the Kindle.
Yeah.
And so he's driving the highways.
Mhm.
So he's not driving highways though. It's like interstate highways,
Right.
just interstates. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to do these interstates, and he'll reflect on, I remember when they first put this in, or like, I remember when 40 was like you were talking about, the only way to get across the country. And
Yep.
it's just really interesting. He talks, like, he'll go through states and he'll be like, this was the only great artist from this place. And some interesting commentary on the Midwest too, that we might get to later. And
Yeah.
I think maybe could inform a project that you and I were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But then he talks about, you know, any writer from like the most obscure to the most well known. Like, you know, he'll talk about, you know, these highly obscure, like you can't find any of their books still in publication, to like Faulkner, and it's really interesting stuff.
And I'm reading a road book too right now, so it's happening
so
to
I
all of us.
I put On the Road in my pile.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I mean, I think the last time I read that book was in high school.
Oh wow, so it's been a while.
It's been a while.
And sadly, I had never read it, so I'm reading it for the first time.
Well, I mean, and like read that book.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
I mean, I'm sure it was.
Right.
I'm sure it. You know, it all comes back around. I've always been like, you know, adventurous and whatever. But Not that, not taking anything away from my high school self, but a lot of things that I'll rediscover that I'm like, oh yeah, I totally missed out on this, or like there was maybe there is like a level of subtlety that was kind of lost on me at that time or whatever. So I figured it was a good addition to the road. I've also like Rings of Saturn's in there.
Well, who wrote that?
Rings of Saturn.
Yeah, I don't know.
W.G. Sebald.
I don't know that book.
So that one has been on my list for like 6 years.
Yeah.
And I finally picked it up. And then I've got The Inferno, the Divine Comedy, I guess.
Right.
Which is, I guess, in its way a travel
road.
And then I've picked up a couple of other books that he referenced in here about. So I'm just leaning into it. You know, I'm just gonna see where it goes. But all of these books have like a different quality to it. So I also have a lot of things. It's funny because there was a different kind of emerging force from a lot of these things, and then it converged with like road travel books. So I don't know where we might be in the middle of it. It might converge into something else by the end of the year, but I'm just kind of going where my interests present themselves, and we'll look back on it and try to make sense of it at the end of the year. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean I started this like 2 days ago. I'm like halfway through with it, and it's super. I didn't it came out of left field. Didn't know this book existed.
I didn't know it existed. I've never seen it out there. I mean, I'm not staring at bookshelves constantly, but I mean, I look at a lot of bookshelves, and I haven't seen that one. Yeah. So I feel like there's another Larry McMurtry book that I picked up. I'll have to double check. I've got a pretty,
this is just really
pretty
cool.
big pile.
What drew me to this was like the drawings.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Are beautiful. I mean, it's just a really nicely put together book too. So it's the American Walk book. So I don't know. We might try to do some of these.
Yeah, that's great.
Do some of these, and I don't know. Maybe.
Well, you guys are road equipped, and you just came back from the road, so I would not be surprised.
I'm trying to get more road equipped.
Yeah,
my friend.
I would. I'm right. I smell what you're cooking, buddy, and I like it.
Studio sessions on the road.
On the road. Could be interesting to do studio sessions on the bike.
Oh my gosh, we
get. They have little comms. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Wow.
I got a lot of work to do,
buddy.
I got a lot of work.
Hold on. Hold on. We record it, split screen it.
Yeah.
Or no, we could just use autopilot. So we literally. Here's what we do. We start at the same time, and whenever you're talking or I'm talking, we switch to that POV shot from the helmet cam.
No, that could be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get some GoPros or those Insta cameras with the little pendant. Yeah. And of course, you need motorcycles, so
we're working on that. We're working on. If anybody listening to this has a motorcycle connection.
Yeah. I am definitely. I'm emotionally all in on the idea. I just have to do all the practical, pragmatic, sad stuff to actually make it happen. Unless, of course, you're able to get partnered up with somebody that sponsored it or something like that. So
we have a trip in mind.
Yeah.
Or I just presented that. I act like we've been talking about this forever. I literally just dropped this on Matt.
But you're not at all far off of what I was thinking about. That's exactly what I was thinking, was to go up the north and west as the first thing.
I think it would be a beautiful
and I know that
first
highway.
Trip, and it's like something happens, God forbid.
Yeah, we're not
make our way back home
right.
with a cab or whatever. Yeah, we're not in California or something.
Right, you're not up in Alaska.
I don't know. That trip might have to wait till the girls are grown.
Yeah. They'll be grown by the time we get back from it.
Yeah. When you do that highway, what's the highway up? Yeah.
Yeah. The big one.
That's pretty well known.
That's
a lot
epic.
of bikers out there.
Yeah.
So I did want to tell a story.
Please.
So you hinted at it a little bit.
I like a good hint.
We were yeah, we were traveling a couple of weeks ago. We went to the Badlands and just explored South Dakota a little bit, and then spent some time in the national park, spent a couple nights there, and then worked our way back down and came through the sandhills of Nebraska, which are like absolutely gorgeous. Valentine, really cool little town. There's a great park there. And we were in, sorry if my adjust, I'm like uncomfortable for some reason.
Can you get there? It's been a while.
Flip the car.
We haven't done this in a little
chair
bit.
around. So for those that are listening, I'm pointing to a piece of silver on my wrist.
I noticed that.
Did I tell you about
day.
this?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, so this is perfect. I'll just share it with you, and then I'll share it with the. So we get to the national park on Saturday, and so we pull in. I don't know my east-west end of the park, but I think it's like the farther end of the park. Less so, like the Notch Trail is on one side of the park, like that's the really well-known trail, and there's like the Badlands. Badlands is a type of landscape, and so it's really prominent on one side, and then it kind of mellows out, and it's still prominent, but there's more buffalo, or not buffalo, but bison.
Yep.
And there's more wildlife, a little bit more greenery and rolling hills, but there's also still some of the Badland landscape. But we kind of found ourselves on that side of the park and really enjoyed it. And there's a campsite out there, and it's kind of like wild camping. You can just pull up
backcountry or whatever.
Yeah, backcountry camping.
Yeah.
And it's like a proper campsite, but there's no hookups or there's no electricity or water or anything like that. Yeah, not really, but no, we pulled up there and we parked the RV and or the camper, and then took off and explored the park for a little bit throughout the day, and then we get back and we're going for a run, and we run by this guy who's camping in his truck, and he's probably, I would say, like late 60s, early 70s. We later found out, he's like late 60s. And he was camping in his truck and had a really cool setup. We were just like, we noticed it, and we were like, oh, that's awesome. Pointed out a setup a couple of times as we were like driving through back and forth, and finished up running and just started. We were like, oh, we'll walk Maggie around because we needed to walk her, and walked over by the truck, and he started making conversation. He was like walking down from the hill and hit a cane, like a really cool cane, wood carved, beautiful cane. And so we started making conversation and talked for about 10 minutes. And he was like, oh, this is interesting about the park, and this is interesting. And just, light conversation. His name was Kent, and really interesting guy. And so, we made 5 or 10 minutes of conversation. We go back to go to sleep, and who knows, that's that. We're like, hey, will we see tomorrow? And he's like, yeah, I'll be here for a little bit in the morning. The following day was going to be Easter Sunday, so he's like, yeah, I'll be here in the morning for a little bit, and then his plan was to go out. So the next morning we get up and we go for a run, and we're gone for like an hour and a half, whatever. We get back and he's still there. And so, I like grab some coffee and walk over to his truck, and I'm like, hey, like how are you? Just wanted to come say hi. And, we strike up a conversation again, and I'm still in running clothes from the run, hadn't like done whatever. And we just get to talking, and, we talked about this and that, whatever, just life, what brings you here, what are you, where are you going next? Where, yada, yada, yada. And find out he's a silversmith.
Cool.
And so, and he like has a rig that he travels in his truck with him. So like his setup was sweet. Like he had this, obviously like sleeping bed, and then like the back area is a closet, not super refined, not like one of these like, but highly utilitarian.
Yeah,
beautiful setup.
Very functional.
Yeah, and he had stickers all over the side. It was awesome. And so we talked for like an hour and a half or an hour or so, And yeah, find out he's a silversmith. And so out of nowhere, he's just like, you want to make something? And he was showing us his jewelry the whole time, by the way. And it was really interesting. And he's like, yeah, I'm just, I'm making my story. And then I wear it, I capture it. And then I put these pieces on. I was like, wow, there's something really beautiful there.
Hell yeah.
And he had all these custom bracelets and things like that. And he's like, some of them I sell, some of them I keep. And I mean, they're very intricate, like very thoughtful narrative jewelry pieces, like crazy stuff. And he's like, yeah, you want to make something? And I was like, and he's like, I'm just going to be hanging out for the day. He thought he was going to go and explore, but he's like, it's Easter, like not a lot's open.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be hanging out. Do you want to make something? And I was like, sure.
Yeah.
So he breaks out this solid block of silver.
No
and so right there, you
way.
can see there's his brand.
Yeah.
And there's, cause it's solid sterling. And so he breaks out this chunk of silver and this anvil.
Yeah.
And these hammers. And I spent the next 6 hours sitting on the
6?
back of this truck. Yeah, it's a hell of a process, man. I mean, you're literally, all of this is just like,
wow.
I mean, thousands and thousands of hammers. So I
yeah.
spent the next 6 hours hanging out with this guy on Easter Sunday.
That's crazy.
In the middle of Badlands National Park. I've never silversmith before.
No, I know.
And he was just teaching me as I went along. And this thing was, this was this was just a chunk of silver.
Yeah.
Like a silver bar. And yeah, slowly worked it into this bracelet and then polished it. And I'll probably never take it off.
That's awesome.
I probably will not. And I was, we had some stuff that kind of came up in our lives, in the last week or so. And I look at this every day. And so I used to have like Memento Mori on my phone, and this is a Memento Mori. Like
That's
this
so
is
cool.
Like every time I look at this, I'm like, man, like it's just the experience of making this, the experience of meeting him, the experience. I mean, it was so human and beautiful.
Yeah.
And real. And he was, when we were talking after, and he's like, and I have a portrait of him, and got a couple. And we were talking after though, and he's like, he showed me this video. So he makes like YouTube videos occasionally of his travels. And he's like, I was filming a video up on that mountain when you guys pulled in. And he's like, I pointed you out in the video for some reason. He's like, you're the only people that pulled in. And he was like, and I just knew that I needed to teach you. And like went on, he's like, I believe in this kind of thing. And he was like a Freemason and had like some Freemason, but this wasn't at all like he's super normal dude.
Yep.
And but he's like, I believe in this thing. And then he goes on, he describes essentially like synchronicity.
Yeah.
And it, obviously different words, whatever. But I mean, I was like, yeah, that's literally this concept that I very much believe in, of synchronicity.
Yeah.
And he's like, something told me that I needed to teach you how to do this. I don't know if you're going to make jewelry or what it is. But he's like, I needed to show you this. And every time I look at this, it just kind of reminds me like, yes, everything's impermanent and just, you got to focus on like, I don't know, man, it's crazy powerful.
So I got 3 things points I need to make.
Come out. Yeah.
I don't want to forget them. I was going to write them down.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3 things. First of all, totally like thought about what you talked about making that bracelet, although it took you longer than it did me. When I was in Poland, we went to a farm and we got to make these little flutes out of a portion of a tree branch, like these traditional Polish flutes. And they teach you how to do it. You carve the bark off, you form it, you hollow it out, you put the little deal on that makes the air go through it so you can make it. And it was just like, it wasn't 6 hours. It was probably about 30 minutes to an hour. And it was just this, I'm like, I'm here in Poland and I'm making a flute out of this. And you
have to give yourself up to the, like, it's like not
amazing.
There's no, it was so beautiful because you just totally immerse yourself in the process. You give yourself up to what's happening. There's no, we're trying to get out of here. Like, no. Yeah. This is a beautiful thing that another person is sharing with me that like transcends like even just our time here.
Well,
you just give into that.
Yeah.
And you give into that process, and you just live in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the 6 hours, I mean, it could have been 5 minutes,
right,
for all I care. Like, it was the same. It was just this beautiful experience, sharing with another human. It's like this deep connection with somebody who you've never met. You didn't know this person 24 hours ago, and who knows if I'll ever, see him again.
And I think this goes into the second thing I wanted to say, which is just the lure of the road. And you're reading a road book. I've been, looking at road trip stuff and having, I've done road trips before, living in Los Angeles, coming back to Omaha, but it's always like beelining it. You're not actually stopping. You're not, improvising along the way. I was just in Vegas for NAB and hung out with my friends and felt like I came away with a lot of rich experiences and met interesting people and cool stories. And we went to a ghost town and we, all this stuff, right? Same thing with Poland, or, my wife and kids going up to Okoboji and stopping at all these different places along the way, different cities and towns. One of the things that contributed to my sort of midlife crisis with overhauling my studio and all this stuff, I've talked about this before, kind of looking up and feeling like I've sat at a desk for 12 hours a day for the last 15, 20 years. And I've missed out on all these incredible potential experiences of meeting people, being on the road, having adventures, dealing with discomfort, things not going as planned. And then when you sit around the campfire, our candle and scotch, or with friends, you've got all these stories to tell when you live a life like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what stories do I have to tell from sitting at my computer, writing, editing, whatever? And while I don't not want to do those things, the imbalance is so severe.
It's so
and
funny,
has
though.
been so severe that I sit there and go, and I don't think I did, but I'm like, did I waste a good chunk of my prime youth, especially before kids when it was easier to do this stuff, sitting at a desk hoping I'd get to that place where I could do all those things, only to realize you have to just do it. You have to make it a part of your life right now, not toil away at the computer hoping it's going to just happen later on when things clear up.
Yeah.
But yeah, the road books, the trail, you guys getting the camper and going out to the Badlands. My wife's going to Colorado with her dad tomorrow. Wanting to take the kids places, us talking about the motorcycle, watching Jason's videos on grainy days. It is just a big part of my psyche right now. All of that desire for discomfort, adventure, spontaneity, just feeling alive out there and meeting people like this that, how incredible. You'll never part with that.
Unreal. Yeah. I haven't taken it off
Yeah. Well, and I'm wearing my piece of jewelry.
Car repairs. I've taken showers with it. I've been to the sauna with it. I've run with it. All of it.
And
it's only been a couple of weeks, but.
And I have my ring from the woman I bought some records off of, and it wasn't a trip like yours. And she was a medium. She opened up to me and told me about her abilities and all that stuff. And I just was sort of like, all right, let's go with this, whatever.
Absolutely.
And then, he said, you want to make something? He talked about having whatever feeling he had when he saw you guys pull in.
Yeah.
She told me how she felt about me when I pulled in. And then she went and got this ring box and said, these are from Hawaii, and I'm being told that you need to have it.
Yeah. Well, it's a crazy important experience too in the aspect of just walk over, have a conversation with people. Like, we're all human. Like, he initiated a conversation talking about bison and coyotes. Like, we talked about bison and coyotes for 15 minutes that first night.
Yeah.
And then learned a little bit about the jewelry. And then that led to like a really special connection the next day.
Yeah.
Just because of small talk about bison and coyotes. You got to open up yourself to the world a little bit, I feel like, to let those experiences come in. One thing I'll say, when you were talking about, you're like, opening yourself up to the world or to the road or whatever, and being able to bring those stories back to the campfire.
Yeah.
The quote unquote campfire. And I mean, this is our camp. That was kind of,
Yeah.
that's a big reason. We have
Right.
the candle, and
Yes.
I mean, it's also a way for us to connect, but
Mhm.
yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Then you mentioned writing,
Yeah.
and I think it's funny to have the and I mean, I mentioned this in a couple episodes ago as well, but you have to get out and experience the world to be able to come back and distill that into some sort of observation
Yeah.
or, you know, I mean, you can do cultural commentary, but that stuff is so,
Right.
it's so quick to dissipate, and it's irrelevant before.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff is irrelevant before our time is even passed, much less
Absolutely.
anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, anything that stems from culture is probably not going to, but, you know.
It's an interesting time capsule, but it's not.
It's an interesting
It's not
time
something.
capsule,
It's not
yeah.
something that I picked up on the road how many years after it was published,
Yeah.
and fully enjoying the read. And it obviously it's a window into a world that's gone now, but there's obviously all the connections that you can make to our the current human experience and everything that we're going through as individuals. So yeah, being able to take all of those experiences from your own travels, your own adventures, your own misadventures, the people that you meet, the relationships that you have, all of that stuff, and translate it into new work, whether it's a song, poetry, a movie, script, a novel, whatever form it's in.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I
Absolutely.
I just that has to be a bigger ingredient in my world, just as someone who wants to have deeper, more meaningful experiences, but then also to take those experiences and put them into the work, especially photography, which has
I constantly think of the
Yeah.
Elia Kazan quote where he's like, a
Yeah.
director has to feel the river on his
That's
his
right.
feet, and has to feel the plains,
Mhm.
the wind that blow. Just you have to experience life.
Yeah.
You have to be in life. You have to be in
Right.
the world. If you're going to attempt to distill anything out of
Mhm.
anything,
and then
and it's so odd too. Sorry, I didn't.
No,
mean to-
you're good. Please.
It's just
Yeah.
so odd how we've created an environment where it's completely possible to sterilize yourself for your entire existence
Mhm.
from like the whatever that is, whatever goes beyond that layer of fabrication.
right.
You can completely separate yourself from that for your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible now.
Yeah.
We've created that. We've managed to make that. And to a point where that seems like the anomaly instead of this,
Right.
which that's not, this is the only time in the history of the world that you could say that.
Yeah.
I think. Not that I'm not complaining. Like, you have options.
Right.
And I tell this to Audrey all the time. Like, I want to be as much of a part of that. I want to be a part of that, whatever that deeper thing is. I want to completely just surround myself and let that kind of consume me, at least now, at least at this point in my life. But I enjoy some of the creature comforts that are offered by
Absolutely,
the other.
yeah.
Like, it's like it is a bit of a paradox. Like, there's both things are true. I can sit here and complain about how this is so terrible and like I can't believe this is the state. But then I can be like, but I like getting bagels on Saturday.
No,
and
yeah, and I don't think there's anything.
we live
Yeah.
in a major city.
Yeah.
It's not like the biggest city, but we live in a major city.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, farmers market's tomorrow. It's nice to go down there, get some green onions and some fresh tomatoes, get a new basil plant, grab something at the deli.
go to the record shop.
Yeah, go to the record shop, hit
Yeah.
up the bookstore. I love all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I want
Go
to,
watch
I want,
movies in public.
yeah,
and all that. Yeah.
I want more of a mixture, a mélange, if you will, of
Yeah.
On the road experiences. Yeah, I took French for 6 years. Of those road experiences and adventures.
François.
Yeah, je parle français un petit peu. Oh no.
No.
I want the mixture of those. I just have given too much time and attention to building things digitally, and again I count screenwriting, stuff that I did at a computer. Even if I was at a typewriter all day, I still sort of consider that very similar. And while that stuff was productive and I've earned income off of it and have been very grateful for all of that, I think just my experience as a person and what I learned from life and the universe and other people and all of that suffers because I'm not out there experiencing it. And even just getting back to third places, talking to people at the coffee shop, making connections at record shop, going to estate sales, the richness that I have in my life just from the people that I've met there, even if it doesn't translate to let's go get coffee or let's go do something together, it doesn't need to.
Yeah.
It's just great to connect with people on that level, including your experience with this guy at the park and the experiences I've had with those things in the things that I've done, which makes me think I don't want to spend any time on this, but when I was in Las Vegas, we went to this ghost town, my buddy Brandon and I, and then with these other YouTubers that are, bigger and more prominent. And, I watch their videos and I'm not like, oh my gosh, there's this person or there's that YouTuber. But you experience two bouts of introversion. I say bout like it's a bad thing. Like you experience times where you feel like your truth is being introverted or sort of not antisocial, but just not extroverted and talking to people. But something about this connection with this person brought that out. You ended up spending 6+ hours, even if you were making something and not engaged in constant extroverted conversation. You didn't kind of turtle up and avoid it. And in this situation at this ghost town, like this is what you've been waiting for. You got in the truck, you drove out there, you're with all these interesting people with stories and backgrounds and whatever. And I just completely locked up.
Yeah.
And just went inside. I was making a video for my photography channel, so I was focusing on photos and video. That was sort of my little, how people like at a party and they don't have anybody around to talk, go on their phone as like a safe place. Like that was my thing to do to feel a little bit safer. And I, missed out on, I think my problem is in that situation is I'm like, okay, these people are, at a farther along in their content creator artistic journey, because a lot of them do things, client work, personal, professional work, and YouTube as well. And I don't want me asking them questions or talking to them to come across as
you don't want to be seen as like a type of person,
or like I don't want them to think like I have an angle.
Yeah,
like I'm worried that they think, well, like, am I going to want to partner up and do something on their channel? Am I going to ask them for something? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so insecure or worried about them.
It's interesting because it's such a goofy thing.
I know, it's so dumb.
Like the idea of, they create more content for brands or like.
They're more successful. Like they're more popular, if you will. It's like you're the freshman.
It's just such a silly
in high school, and the cool seniors are there, and you're like, well, if I talk to them, they're gonna think I'm trying to like.
Well, the high school thing's that's a good metaphor because you look back on 90% of the stuff you did in high school, and you're like, how fucking stupid was that? Like. And
the stuff you didn't do,
and
like talk to girls.
If there's people listening in high school, I'm not. This is negative, but this is just a fact of life. Like you're gonna look back, and you just see things from a oh man, there were a lot of socially engineered games that were being played that were completely pointless.
Right.
And we still play those games as adults. They just look a little different. And most people don't even realize they're playing those games as adults.
Yeah.
But it's like that was totally you got like caught in a game.
And then what's funny is when I came back,
which is bizarre,
there was I was there not at NAB, but I was connected with B&H, the video camera store from New York that has a pretty big website that sells stuff to filmmakers and whatnot. And they had a big party. And so a lot of the people that I was at that ghost town with were there, and then other people. And then the switch completely flipped. And then I was like full extrovert.
Confident,
talking, chatting up. Like I was actually trying to like help the people that I wasn't afraid to talk to, but I was just sort of withdrawn from at the ghost town. But at the party, I'm like, I can see that they've now introverted.
Yeah.
And I'm just talking to them, and maybe making them hopefully feel a little bit more comfortable because they're tired or they're ready to be done or they've been talking to so many strangers because they're more well known, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just completely.
You sent me that video yesterday.
Yeah,
which is similar.
Yes, the one on Jung.
Yeah, but just kind of the more general idea of you're perceiving your world to be a certain way.
And all of that stuff being a reflection of what's going on. So I look at that, situation of the ghost town and I'm just like, you are someone that is insecure and, maybe you think you should be somewhere with what you're capable of, but you're not. And you're around people that are farther along than you are, even though they have their own issues and setbacks and things that they wish they had done differently, all the same stuff as you, but you let that perception of it dictate your behavior, and like that, and that video talks about shifting your perception, and then the thumbnail says something like "don't give a shit anymore" or whatever. It's like in that situation, if I could go back, just like you're saying about like high school, in college, I wish I could go back and just not give a shit.
Yeah, just don't care what people think.
What would you be like, and what would you do under those circumstances? Before we go down any talk of that, though, and not to cut this off, you said that the gentleman said, he saw you guys pulling in and some kind of connection or whatever. I just started a new podcast, and this sounds a little, when I tell you the title of it, it's going to sound like, oh boy. I gotta look it up.
See what Matt's podcast rotation is these days.
So it's called The Telepathy Tapes with Kai Dickens. Unveiling the hidden world of telepathic communication in a silenced community.
Interesting.
So telepathy is a word that I think, we think about ghosts, we think about, supernatural stuff that is kind of out there. And really what it's about is it's about shared consciousness. It's not about telepathy like I'm going to move this book on the table. It's about...
we spent half an hour talking about energy.
Right.
Like picking up energy off of people and situations.
Yes. Before we started recording. Yes, exactly. And when you mentioned that this guy felt some kind of connection when you guys pulled into the park, and then you ended up spending 6 hours with him, and it all sort of just materialized, it made me think of this podcast, and thinking that there's a sensitivity that we all have to varying degrees about our connections with other people and the energy that we share back and forth. How many times have I told you when you call me, I'm like, I literally was just thinking about you and you called me like within seconds, So it's stuff along those lines that I think all of us, whether we are open or not to this idea of telepathy, which again, I don't think it's a good word.
And
it's a good word.
Yeah,
it's not a good word to describe
unconscious,
this.
Like we all have some sort of connected energy, which is getting harder to actually deny.
But what's interesting about this podcast, and I'd be, I'm curious to continue to explore it. It was recommended to me by a friend. nonverbal autistic kids in this podcast will be in a room and their mother is in another room, and they set up this little test because the parents have reached out to these people to just like get a better understanding of what's happening. But like the mother will have an iPad with a random word generator, and the mother will read the word to herself, see what the word is, and then the nonverbal autistic child who's in a completely other room and can't see the iPad will spell out the word that the mom read.
Interesting, yeah.
There's a story that's coming up about a nonverbal autistic child who knows the entire Harry Potter story, never read it, but learned it because while their sister was reading it, they were absorbing it while the sister read it.
Yeah.
Like crazy stuff like that.
No, I mean,
that sounds like telepathy, right? Like what card am I holding? You can't see it. Guess what it is? Like a very light form of telepathy. But what really made me turn the corner with that podcast, and again, it connects back to what you said about what the gentleman said when he saw you pulling in, is this idea of shared consciousness. And like,
AKA Jung was right. No.
Yeah, and so yesterday's video that I sent you, combined with this, the things that we've talked about to a certain extent on this podcast, and then just these general sensations, feelings. We made up the word parame about my experience in Los Angeles and it being very haunting and strange and surreal, and I feel like another version of myself in another dimension is existing there, and I'm right next to it, like all that weird stuff. So it's just interesting to continue to develop and explore these frameworks for these feelings, powerful feelings, vibes, whatever you want to call it.
Do you think it's happening with autistic children maybe because they're more similarly to how someone who's deaf or someone who's blind
heightened senses, yeah.
Oh.
Well, and they,
maybe there's a heightened
right.
I mean, I'm fascinated. I've seen, you see different clips of people communicating essentially fluently, but they're both speaking different languages. I've seen that before. Or
there's a viral.
You see mother, or I'm sure you experienced this with the girls, where they're talking, but they're not, like, it's nonsense. And to anybody outside of your family group, it would be nonsense, but you've become so attuned that you can almost have a fluent conversation with like a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's utter just phonetic nonsense.
Well, Goldie was nonverbal. My youngest daughter was nonverbal to the point where we had to get a speech therapist to come in because we understood everything she wanted without her having to say anything.
Yeah. So you guys didn't.
And I don't mean like it was like telepathy. I wasn't like reading her mind.
No, but I mean, it's probably a similar sensation. Yeah. It's just,
and so she didn't have a need to develop speaking because all her needs were met.
Yeah.
They're like, the speech pathologist literally said, you guys are too good at knowing what she needs without her having to say anything.
Ignore your daughter.
You have to let her say it because she's not going to develop speech because she doesn't need to. There was a viral video of these two adult identical twin women who are being interviewed for like a news segment, and they literally talk at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like this perfect like mind meld where they finish like, it's weird. It's a when I read the article, I was expecting one thing and how they actually spoke, and it was a little different than what I was expecting, but they're like, we can't not do this.
Yeah.
We speak together with everything we do. And that to me is another sort of reflection of a shared consciousness, especially identical twins. They're in the womb together. All of that. And this thing is really fascinating. Just the different things that these nonverbal autistic kids are able to do with siblings, parents, and I, like the one kid, the mom had watched a movie and the kid knew what the whole movie was and had never seen it in person. Like the mom watched it in another room in the house.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it resonates with me because, we all have these experiences where we feel drawn to someone. There's something sort of inexplicable about the connection. Just all of that stuff. So it's fun to explore new frameworks, and I certainly have a few Jung books that are queued up that I'll be reading to learn more about it.
I mean, you're talking about myth, collective unconscious, collective myth, all of these ideas that, I mean, you've talked about Joseph Campbell before, but then, I mean, Jung probably the forebearer of a lot of these ideas. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's something to that in a way that a lot of people don't really comprehend right now. But I also think, like, tying everything together, there's a lot of cultural noise that almost hides that. Yeah. And that, like, when you've talked about in past episodes, the source.
Rick Rubin's.
And I mean, I think the source is the collective unconscious. Like you talked
about.
Yeah,
it's all that. Yeah.
And it ties into creating timeless work. Like if you can tap into that like a well metaphor,
channel something out of it.
You're pulling from that, and yes, you're a conduit. And I mean, that's how I think about creativity. Is like, it's not you creating. You're a conduit for some idea that's floating, and you're pulling it down. But I think about the collective unconscious and trying to almost purify your signal, your receiver to signal ratio, where you can actually pick up on it. Because I think getting back to what I was saying earlier, where we've created a world, like an artificial layer on the outside where you can go your whole life without connecting. I think a lot of people do. Like, it ties into that too. Like, yes, I can describe it as like a level of humanity or whatever, but it's also something that's attuned with that collective unconscious, something that's attuned with kind of the energies that guide, the forces that guide us that we might not see or understand. And I think when you start to strip away a lot of the unnecessary, trivial things that bombard us on a day-to-day basis, you get to something that is in touch with that. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons. Yeah. I mean, I've made a lot of decisions in my life on that idea. And it's curious because I wanted to ask you, like, you were talking about creating work, and I think I've asked you this on past episodes, but I'm interested to see where your headspace is at now. Do you feel like you've ever created something that is timeless, or that steps out of that'll outlast you? It's just something I've been thinking about a lot, not in an egotistical way.
No,
but,
yeah.
We've been, I mean, I've had a lot of, like, eye-opening things over the last couple of years, and you've had a lot of eye-opening things as well throughout your life. And I think, when you see some of these things and you start to, especially if you interface with things that are older than your immediate, scope of vision, you can start to feel some things. Yeah. And do you feel like you've created, like, not that should be the goal, and again, not in an egotistical way, but approaching that in a way of, what are we doing? Like, yes, there's something to the act of creation that I think is therapeutic and beautiful, but also, you should be striving to create. Maybe you shouldn't be striving to, but I think it's a noble goal to want to create something that outlives you, or that taps into a truth that kind of goes beyond what your consciousness can replicate. Yeah. Do you? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I, have.
Apologies for the crazy word vomit,
no, it's great. I've had those things throughout my, throughout what I've pursued. I feel like, I can look back through everything that I've tried to make from a sort of, like these are my experiences in the world and my connection to source, and I want to take all of that and translate it into something, a performance, a photograph, a script, a story, whatever it is. And I've done those things along the way and felt, powerful connection with another actor, a real sort of truth and purity in something that happened after surrendering to the making of the thing.
Moment.
Yeah, just the truth in the moment, and something where obviously like it wasn't presented to the entire world like in a movie or a play, but the people in the room might remember it, and that's not. Matt was so amazing when he did this thing. It could have been a scene with my fellow actors or a monologue I did, but I had some early experiences with that feeling, the flow, the conduit nature of it, and again the relief that you get, I think, psychologically and emotionally when you actually surrender to something. You stop giving a shit. You stop trying to control it. You stop just trying to manufacture something.
It's kind
and
of the definition of conduit, right?
Yeah.
There's no pretext to being like, if you're going to be if you're going to just be a vessel, then you have to kind of.
And I have a couple screenplays that I wrote, and that doesn't mean that they're good or like, in a like a traditional, like if I entered it into the Nickel Fellowship and everybody would agree that this is both well crafted and something special because of the surrender that comes off the page, but then also the truth and purity of it, the conduit to the source, if you will. But I've written stuff where I didn't give a shit about like the bullshit rules, like, it has to be 105 pages long. You have to have an inciting incident at page 12, like all this kind of stuff. But, still wanted to embrace the craft of storytelling, whether it was, 3 or 4 act structure that we might have seen in movies from the 40s or 50s, all the way to, what's more commonly, 3 act structure. But not so far as to like the formulaic save the cat stuff where you're hitting all these markers at certain points of your movie. I
think there's like a metaphysical a reality to storytelling.
Yeah.
But there's also there's like the commercial save the cat. Yeah.
Well, it's like what Bruce Springsteen says, like you've got the one side of a 45, like you have a container, you have a form, you have a construct that you adhere to.
There's only so much you can do, and that's almost a blessing.
Right, exactly. And then, obviously, going into photography and all that stuff, the way I do it, that to me is the way that I feel surrendered and connected all at the same time, to just be out in the world observing what's happening and to have a camera ready to go to capture a moment of truth and purity and whatever that I see, whether it's in inanimate objects and light, or it's in something human that's happening on a street, or the expression a person has on their face, or the pattern of colors. Like, how the hell are all of these colors, red and yellow, like in a perfect line in this alley, in the scene that I'm seeing, all that stuff.
I think I just want to cut in for a second because it just connects to a quote I was reading in The Photographer's Eye by John Tchaikovsky. Yeah. And there's this quote that the eye sees a perception, the camera sees the truth. And that you can revisit. I read this earlier, like this morning. Yeah. But it's just this idea that you might be seeing something through the viewfinder of the camera with your perception. Yeah. But whatever is captured in the camera is in a way it's a truth that you can return to at any time, and then that'll teach you. That's going to teach you something that you may have not known when you took the picture. Yeah. It's going to transcend the perception. So it's just a beautiful connection to kind of what you just said.
Yeah.
You're out there and you're just observing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the camera is the perfect conduit in a way.
I mean,
you can try to contextualize an image, or you can try to create false context within an image, but the most you're going to do is kick that can down the road.
Yeah. And of all the, work that I've made, whether it's a screenplay, a poem, if I took everything that I've ever made, even like, a performance in a play or whatever, if I took everything that I ever made and had to sort of and gravitated to one area of what I've made that to me is most connected to source and the conduit and all that, it would have to be the photography work.
Yeah, that's
not only.
It's so interesting too because that's so late.
It's incredibly late, yeah. But again, I've been an observer of this stuff my whole life, and when it was writing or acting, it was always taking the constant observation and mapping and energy perception and all that of everything going on, whether it was inanimate objects, the beauty, like see how the light and the thing and the whatever. I just never thought 15 years ago, like I can take pictures of these things and make work.
You're mapping it. You're creating a psychological.
Right.
Yeah.
But I store it as an image that's going to go into a screenplay, or it's going to be the opening lines in a short story where I'm setting up the space that the characters are living in. So are
you filtering it through yourself at that point?
I mean, I think always.
It's
Well, and you're absorbing all of that, and then it's there in this collection of things that you have, and then something happens where you have a question or something to say, and what form it's going to be in, and especially me predominantly being a writer in all of my artistic pursuits after acting school and before now. You look at that collection of things, and then you harvest it for use in the asking of the question or the saying of the thing. And I don't mean the lesson you're trying to teach the people who read your thing, the didactic nature of it, but just how you're translating your experience of life through these stories. The thing that I like about photography is for me, it's incredibly instinctual and it's immediate. You don't have time to think about it.
There is no translation
you
can translate how you decide to interpret.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a translate. Like, yes, if you take a picture of two separate subjects to create a new idea. Or if you're linking ideas, but
it's this hyper-focused process in the sense that I'm observing things and collecting things constantly throughout the day, throughout the weeks, throughout the year,
right?
And then you're soaking it all up. You're thinking of it this way. You're thinking of it that way. You're bending it. You're breaking it, and over a long period of time, you're translating it into a written
subconsciously, mostly
subconsciously, but then. Stuff bubbles up that you put on the page or you put into a scene between the actors or whatever. With photography, I go out onto the street and I am taking it all in. You see it, and in an instant you react to it, the decisive moment, right? And you don't have time to be reflective about it, to edit it in the moment. And I don't mean the photo. I mean edit the moment. Well, maybe that's not quite lined. You're like, something just happened, Or if you're really good, you can feel it swelling up, and the camera's ready when it happens.
Yeah.
Versus what happens to me a lot, and this is part of the craft. I'm like convincing myself it's not going to happen, and I miss the photo instead of like a full surrender to it, to where you don't even think about it. You just take the photo, and then, you have just like one side of a 45, you have the frame that the sensor or the film and the lens allows for, your composition of it, exposure, the craft of the image. And I love the condensed and hyper focused, concentrated nature of that. I want to not think as much. I overcomplicate everything. I'm too cerebral and get in the way. With photography, I get to be instinctual, and is that a word? Instinctive.
Yeah.
I get to operate in that plane, which for me, again, is someone who has dealt with control and just all that dumb stuff. It's just a great way to surrender and just let it happen. And then, I can sometimes look at the photograph and see things in it that I didn't see in the moment, being in the real world. And I start connecting it to things that I'm experiencing in life, or questions that I have, or things I have to say. Especially when you're sequencing the photos, you're like, I'm sensing a connection here. Why am I taking photos of all these kids that are on the fringes of these parades? Like, why does that speak to me? Why is there what is going on there that resonates with me? So it not only is a way to be introspective and wonder things about yourself and how it's a reflection of what's going on with you, but also a reflection of how you observe the world and the things that you sense about it, that you notice about it, that either interest you or sadden you or give you great joy, or whatever it is. Or to me, sometimes it's just like, how the hell did these three things come together right there? Did you see that?
And
I took a picture of it.
I don't necessarily think that's unique to photography, because I do think what you're talking about can occur in writing, or it can occur
absolutely 100%.
In film or music, especially, like all of these things. But I do think photography tends to put that front and center a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe it's really hard to get there in writing. It's really hard to get there.
I get in the way too much.
Yeah.
I just get in the way. And I feel like with photography, I don't have a chance to get in the way and mess it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I do, because I won't. I'll be like, no, that's not going to happen. Oh, shit, the kid just did it. I missed it.
Well, it's interesting too. You talked about you'll learn these. Your photographs will teach you these things. And getting back, that quote of, it is the truth whether you like it or not. Like, at some point, it's going to teach you something that you may have not even been contending with in the moment.
Yeah.
Or at least it has that potential, which is, again, writing has that potential.
Right.
Music has that potential, but a lot of writing or music or even photography that we see doesn't have that potential. That potential's been co-opted by something else.
Right.
But yeah, I do think, I don't know, maybe photography stumbles upon that a little more frequently.
Yeah.
Maybe it just increases the surface area for something like that to occur. But
well, it just when I've been out taking photos, I have plenty of times where I go out and I don't feel like a lot happens, or I get very much. And then there's other times where, and these are in some of my photography videos on my second channel, but I'll be out having taken photos all evening, and in one video that I made, there was an older gentleman sitting on a bench here in Dundee, and he was sketching a scene. I'm like, I've literally never been out in Omaha and seen somebody just like sketching this sunsetty scene in Dundee. And I asked him, is it okay if I get video of you doing this? And I just set up a couple different shots, because in my photography videos I have photos and videos, because it's called photo videos. So I'm just like, how amazing is this that I met this guy who's a sketch artist or whatever, asked him some questions similar to this gentleman who's a silversmith, and I got to just have this moment of documentation of him doing this as this little coda to the video. And I was in Chicago last summer, and I came up on a scene of this guy trying to resuscitate a old sick pigeon.
Bizarre.
And I'm like, just like the sketch artist, I'm like, I'm going to film this. And I had my little Blackmagic pocket camera, and I just documented him trying to have this pigeon drink water out of a Coke can, and like all this stuff that he was doing. It was just fascinating to me. And I'm just like, what an interesting choice for you to make on this hot ass July day is to be out here in this planter helping a bird that is obviously old and not going to make it very much longer.
Yeah, but stripping away all of that, like what a beautiful just image, what a beautiful
and it's a whole little
metaphor,
scene at the end of the video. And I'm like, this is why I want to be out in the world making stuff, because I want to come across these moments and these scenes. And obviously I've had some scary run-ins as well, but
it's going to happen.
But I feel more connected, more alive out there doing those things and making that work than I do sitting at the desk, where I feel like, I'm connected to my friends and my audience through my channel and all that, but I've never felt more disconnected because it's a magic rectangle and a bunch of machinery versus a guy at Badlands that lets me craft a silver bracelet that I'm going to wear for the rest of my life for 6 hours.
Yeah. No, I think you talking about the guy resuscitating the pigeon, really just puts it into a beautiful perspective of when you think about, and maybe this is just me, but when I think about the world today, it in a lot of ways it feels less interesting. Mm-hmm. At least the world that I'm exposed to on a regular basis.
Yeah.
People seem less interesting. Situations seem less interesting. The metaphors and the language we use is kind of dull. It's just been dulled by repeated use. Mm-hmm. It's been exhausted in a lot of ways. And humanity or these unique situations help us refresh our metaphors. It helps us refresh our language. And I think, we've just been beating away at that for 2-3 decades, 4 decades, whatever. And I think, if you want any chance at creating anything interesting, you've got to find language, find metaphors that aren't dull.
Yeah.
And, find the guy resuscitating the pigeon. Fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. Makes me think, something I'm like, wow, I don't think I've seen that one before.
No.
Probably not going to come up with that. And just, I don't know. Yeah. I think that's really important, especially in our current, where we are in the world right now, just in terms of, contending with AI or like figuring out what makes us unique as human beings, and also just figuring out what makes interesting or worthwhile art or work or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I have a clear, period to put on that, but.
Well, you had asked too, like, I think part of that, what I talked about was spurred because you said,
just
do you feel like
you've
yeah. I mean, I was just thinking while you said that, especially based on that video I sent you yesterday about not giving a shit. I think about that moment with that guy and me filming him with my little Blackmagic camera, and I think about the sketch artist on the bench, or I think about some of the photographs from those videos or the photographs I've taken just since I started, going hard on photography. And I just go, there are, 10, 15, 20 photos or moments that are on video that I just love what's there. And part of that's connected to my memory of the actual experience of it. A somebody at the Museum of Modern Art who, curates photography for the museum might look at every photo I've ever taken that I think is amazing and go, eh.
Yeah.
And I just sit there and go, and not like it's for me, like in an ego way, but I just go, I just love it so much. Like in the end, while it would be amazing to have someone want to put up a gallery of your work, or they want to print your stuff in a book, all that stuff, it's worth it for me, not only to have the experience of trying to get into source, trying to get into the truth and purity of just being out there translating your experience into an art form, a piece of work. Just looking through what I've made, and going, I really like this.
Yeah.
I have this one photo of the 4 girls that were up on the parking garage when we were just starting to do those photo walks. And, I could show that to anybody and be like, oh, it's interesting. And I just look at it and go, I just love that photo. I love the energy from those girls, that she's sitting on the edge of the parking garage, and if she makes one wrong step, she's going to fall off and die. I mean, she was 2 or 3 stories up, sitting there smoking a cigarette with her legs over the edge. All those little ingredients, being out there with you, the connection, all that stuff. And I just go, yeah, this is an all-timer for me in the body of work that I've made.
Yeah.
And I don't give a shit what anyone else thinks.
Yeah.
I like it. And I think that's the last thing I'll say about the photography stuff is, I certainly have, screenplays that I've written where I'm like, yeah, maybe it's not the best, the most well-told story, or it's overly complicated, or whatever it is. But I'm like, this is the movie I want to see.
Yeah.
And if nobody else wants to, fine. But I made it, and the screenplay, and I like it. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I say all that, I would never let how I like it make me not give a shit about the craft of it.
Yeah.
I want to
go deeper on that for just a second. Yeah, I'm interested to see what you...
I think sometimes for me it's easy to go, well, these were my impulses. This is what I felt like making. And because it came from that place of impulse and channeling of some connection to source, let's say, that is what makes it good.
Yeah.
And I tend to be someone that is not as diligent about the craft aspect of it, and improving how well made it is.
Yeah.
I'm really good at just going, I feel these things, I'm going to put it out there.
Yeah.
But then how do you actually, like we've talked about before, how do you sort of have audience objectivity to go, but is this communicating well? Is this reading right?
Start to strip away the context that you're taking for granted, or
that's right.
refine
your subjective point of view of it, and have a way to look at it objectively, to bring the craft aspect of it to bear.
Yeah.
I get too caught up in the emotion of making it, and that sometimes tricks me into thinking, therefore it's good.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to photography, it's everything. It's sensing when something's going to happen and being ready at the decisive moment to capture it. But when you do, to know how you want to frame it, to know what your focal length is, to know what your depth of field is, to know, what the conditions are, to have your exposure triangle correct. In the editing process, everything.
Yeah.
Printing the photos, sequencing them, all of that
and then
stuff.
getting to a point too where you are so at peace with those things that it starts to disappear.
Right. Yeah.
The mastery on the other side of craft or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't want to not give a shit at the expense of craft.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, think it, feel it, make it, send it. Like,
Yeah.
let's watch that cycle. And
I do think the emotion though is more important. And
yes, I would take,
I would
take that over
I think the craft is necessary, but you do have a lot of, very fine craftsmen
absolutely
who are not making,
who have work that is,
it's not moving or doing, causing any kind of beneficial reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the emotion is but the craft is then, and when you get both, then that's when
the magic happens.
When the work starts to elevate itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Just I don't really want the last word because you kind of wrapped it up well. But I know we're close to time. But the reason that I asked that question, just to give a little bit of background, is I told you a few weeks ago we sat down and we recorded an episode, and we sat and we chatted a little after, and I was just like, I feel like I've really gotten to a point where I'm sick of just the trivial day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's just a lot of nonsense.
Yep.
And I'm just like, I just don't want to interface with that stuff anymore. I just want to really focus on doing and pursuing things that, again, that are going to kind of outlive me.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that maybe I do. I don't think I mean that in an egotistical way though, or in a way that's self-serving, but just in a way that's the stuff that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Rings of Saturn or the Divine Comedy or, Swan's Way, or, a lot of stuff I read, and just, revisiting a lot of these Herzog films over the last year. And I'm just listing off things that have been front of mind, influencing me. And they're not dealing with subject matter that's cultural.
Yeah.
They're not dealing with subject matter that's going to change in the next 100 years, probably not the next 1,000 years. Like, they're dealing with subject matter that's just rich, and I want to work in that area.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to move in that direction. I'm trying to make a very intentional shift towards that, but I don't know. You can hold me accountable on it. And people, other people can, but
no, and I know what you're talking about too, because it's hard to articulate, because it's so easy for us to think that the primary motivator is ego and our immortality, where our work lives beyond our own life. And for me, it's, as someone who observes and absorbs and soaks up everything around me, trying to see little moments of truth or purity or profoundness or beauty, magic, love, all of that. I'm often sort of like in a full heart from taking those things in, and there is a desire, having received those gifts, to give back to it by making something that is an offering to the altar of truth or the altar of source.
It's not even like a desire. It's more like an obligation.
Yeah,
it's like if you take 2 pennies, at least put one penny back.
That's right. It's this reciprocity.
I've taken like 100 pennies at this point. Like, I need to put a penny back.
That's right. That's exactly it. There's sort of like a good indebtedness that you feel, and you want to share what you can do back to it. And it's also having taken in incredible work from other people, from, Alex Soth, the stuff that we have at the Jocelyn Art Museum, the stuff that we've seen from our friends who make great work, everything, that just a desire to contribute to that that giving of those experiences to other people. I just feel like I get so much from this stuff, this hard work that people that do to make things, whether, again, it's on the one spectrum, content or, stuff that's a little bit more like social commentary or whatever, but all the way to the other side, which is just, pure artistic expression, for lack of a better term, but just something that's true and pure. I just want to be a part of that because, again, I've taken and gained so much from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a desire to participate in it, but not to make me the exalted one.
Yeah.
Looking down on everyone for having been, having made these things.
It's one of the, I'm happy to make that contribution in silence.
Yeah.
I just feel the need to make that contribution.
Yeah.
I not even the need. I almost just feel that obligation.
That's
obligation
right.
is a good word for it. To make that contribution.
Mm-hmm. A responsibility, a calling.
It's very clear. Yeah. It's just the only thing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only consistent force, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I would say, if you're able to have the clarity of what, of that feeling, that my hope would be, and this isn't because I think things are interfering for you personally, but anybody is, to let any concerns about how it might appear when you make what you want to make. I'm worried people are going to think this is egotistical. I'm worried they're going to think this is self-serving or whatever, to try not to give a shit about what it might look like, and if it's
but
to
then
contribute
also
to that.
making sure it's not I guess is an aspect of it, because we can sit here all day and be like oh, I don't mean this in an egotistical way or in a self-serving or, and then at the same time, it's not to say that we are, free of that desire.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely something that I think both of us contend with.
Yeah.
I'd say 99.9% of people probably contend with that. And so, having the clarity and just the stamina and the ability to keep that out of the process, even though it's going to fight to kind of make its way into the process.
Yeah, and the thing, we've talked about this before, my weakness in that is having raw emotion and putting it out there immediately. This thing happened, I'm going to go live on Instagram and talk about it. Not because I think that that's art, but because, these tools are there so that, when I have a big feeling and I want to share that feeling or that thought or that reaction in its raw, untranslated state, that for me typically is coming from a place of ego or attention, things like that. When I go out and take photographs, which is why I like doing it so much, none of that shit enters my mind. Yeah. It's just,
what am I doing at this moment?
Yeah, how do I stay open to the things that develop in front of me that are the things I've been watching my whole life, moments of truth, of beauty, of purity, of
well, it's like a good conversation.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of, you're just there, you're okay, I don't know what's going to come next, but then I'm going to figure out what that is. I'm going to react to that accordingly.
Yeah. Versus every time you talk, my eyes glass over.
Yeah.
And I try to, steer the conversation into ways that only benefit me.
Yeah.
I want this advice. I want this help. I want you to hear what I have to say. A very one-sided, self-centered
exchange.
Self-centered dumping.
Yeah.
And I've been in those interactions.
Yeah.
And
I've been on both sides of those interactions.
Yeah. Same here as and I've definitely learned not to do that. And it's the same thing with the work that we make.
Yeah.
You learn how to have a conversation where you're not so consumed with yourself and what you're getting from that conversation. You learned those people stop talking to you. And if you do that with the work as well, nobody cares. And it doesn't go anywhere.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer.